document we have. So this particular document uh, does not give any clue about how the UI navigation is going to come, but it gives us an idea about each screen and what kind of data it is going to play around with that. So by reading it, I could get, okay, there is a link has been given for doing a registration, wherein which you need to send first name, last name, username, password, and gender. Gender looks like it has to be sent as a 1 or 2. So the sample response request also been given. So this is the payload it has to be sending, and with the header, HTTP header added as this particular URL form encoded. So the possibility would be when the registration goes successful, it gives us a JSON object. So JavaScript object notation looks like it is going to have an attribute name called result, repeated throughout all the responses, and result having an affirmative answer like okay, done, or something like. So based on this result, the rest of the detail changes. So if a result has been received, okay, there will be an attribute called message, and the data is giving me an array, and each array having an object associated with that. So failure result, it's actually giving me failed. So based on that another object called data is missing here because the result has gone failed. So this is how we are going to use this particular URLs and going to make various calls with them and trying to get the result. Based on the result, we are trying to we are going to let the user to move on to a different navigations. So this application looks like going to have a login page, a registration page, and when the user successfully logs in, he sees all the items or all the data entered by that specific user, and there's going to be an option to add a new item, and option to edit an existing item, an option to delete an item. So everything has been given. So it looks like it is simple shopping list app where the data is going to be tied up with the username whatever you're going to register. So first we plan the UI. Some name, let it be with the core data, even though we are not going to use it, but in future we may use the core data to cache the data into memory if at all we need to speed up the page loading. So we have been given with the all defaults. We have a view controller, initial view controller, because this has been set to this one. So assuming this is going to be the very first view controller, and we are going to start playing around with that. Okay, I'll probably create a new view controller. So I just leave these view controller. Probably I delete it at all because I wanted meaningful name. Coca touch class only. First one, I'm going to create a login view controller. It's very important. Make sure you pick the subclass, meaning the inherited class, which is should be based on the view controller. Don't check it. If you create it, you will be given an interface file separately. So we don't want that because the storyboard itself accommodate everything. So this view controller was just created. It's just loading. Okay. So I'm going to tell this particular view controller, not this one. It's going to be login view controller because just I want a meaningful name. I really don't want just a name which is having a view controller. Okay. Now first job is to wrap the entire thing into a navigation controller, because so far the design we have learned, everything is based on the navigation view controller. So let me organize these things. Okay, so navigation item is already there. I mean navigation bar, which has been already been given. So login, and we are going to put a UI text field. This design is based on the username login. Okay. I prefer the placeholder. Enter. User and password has been given. I mean the placeholder has been assigned, and this has to be a password type. So it should be secure text entry. So when you make it, this becomes a password type field. So you won't see the text whatever being typed on it, and the button. Since I am doing it for a free form type, mean the design what I am creating is not exclusive for iPhone alone. It may be working good for iPad also. That's the reason that user interface is slightly bigger. I start with a left oriented design, mean my components everything start from left and exceed up to the end of the view. So that's the reason I drag it. You may be wondering, I should have left that table view up to here itself. Why I'm still dragging it and giving the space to go up to this level? Because of the reason the auto layout will try to apply some sort of constraint from top, left, right, and whatever bottom. So it will try to push all those things into a respective corners. So resulting text would be, or resulting view would be perfect for any kind of form factor. That's the reason I am still designing it for a free form, having a additional width has been assigned to that. Okay. We're done with this, and we have to make sure the reset because that suggested constraint being taken effect. So we are seeing some sort of constraint being added. We'll first verify everything goes well in each stage. Okay, it's fine. And better so if the user enters the username from the soft keyboard, but the keyboard has to be dismissed when the view focus on outside. That also we have to make sure. There are a couple of other touch-ups we have to do once we complete the design. Okay, we need one more view controller for registration. Okay, this view controller I would like to launch it modelly. I mean, just instead of a navigation controller, I just want to display it on the top of it. That design I have already explained to you. Only thing, it is not going to have a navigation bar or back button. We are forcing the user to register. Okay. Time it doesn't pick it, so I'm just going to do it from here. When a login button is hit, it's going to take to this one. I'm going to present it modelly. the way it launches the view controller is going to be slightly different. Instead of something to do with the navigation controller, everything under the navigation controller is stack, but whereas this login or this particular page, I'm going to launch it as a model on the top of it, excluding, because I can launch this particular screen anywhere from my screen, because once I design it, I should give an option to edit the registration data, so I can still launch this particular view controller anywhere from one of my view controller. Instead, I tie up with one of the view stack, I still keep it separate. So let's put some data. Here we'll see what are all the details needed for registration. So it looks like first name, last name, username, password, gender. So we probably need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 fields. Each one would accommodate label as well. So let me drag a label plus text field. Label and text field. We hide it for some time. First name, last name, username, and password. Finally, it's going to be gender. Gender will make it as a picker view, something we'll put it off. Since I yet to define the scroll view, I need to make sure everything is smaller. So I keep it up. Do we have any other data? Just gender alone. That's it. Let's define the placeholders. Password, gender, even though it's going to be picked directly from a picker view. Okay, everything fine. We'll have to leave a button. So cancel, this is to save. Since it is a free form type, I need to probably give a equivalent space for each form, each buttons. So just drag it up to the middle, some sort of idea to maintain the aspect ratio, adaptive design. Okay. fine. Let's create a corresponding class. We create a registration view controller, assign it, password should be secure type. Just as I haven't given auto layout, I gave it for a login for testing purpose. So auto layout is not present. Hopefully the constraints been added. Looks like various thing added. Still save is not coming perfect. Okay. If you see that one is overshadowing another, probably we can clear the constraint for the selected view, try to adjust it accordingly and set a constraint. So we have save and cancel. Oh, cancel is overriding. You can also add constraint programmatically. We will see as we do a slightly complex projects. At this point we have to focus on completing it. Cancel is okay. So, okay, we'll come back to that a little later. Maybe I need to slightly reduce the size. Okay, so cancel should dismiss itself and save should call the web service to register it, and we'll also delink the login instead. Remove the segue. Sorry, segue alone need to be deleted. Bar button item I'm going to place. This is for my registration. This one I am going to connect with this view controller. Oh, sorry. Did I connect it to the same place? Yes. That's a problem. And to dismiss it, I'm going to write event listener IV action for my button. So this is, I hope I've already connected with the registration view controller. Let me create a event to call my button clicks for back button. Save button also we need to write, but okay. Save button pressed. This is for handling the save. So these two methods to be implemented. Dismiss view controller animated when you call it. This particular view controller which has been displayed on the top of it will get dismissed itself, and you will end up seeing the previous view controller. So I need to connect it. There are various ways. One is the file owner object. You may be finding the events whatever you added. Cancel button pressed. I'm just going to point it to this one. When touchdown mean when it is pressed, you can call that. Otherwise, right clicking and tell that to your file owner, you will be given chance to pick up the events. So whatever way, for example, let me remove it. So the opposite way, you can still call touchdown and search for it. You will be given option. So which one you would like to pick? Whatever way you can choose it. So when the user click on cancel, it is going to dismiss itself. The save button I had to add the event, functions. So when you click on register, when you cancel it, just get dismiss itself. There are some constraint issue. I'll come back to it a little later, because it's just on the edge. If I click it, just click the save button. I do notice that. So we just keep the registration appears as presented as a model. Model mean usually model pop-up kind of thing, which just occupies the top position. So still the view controller is working on the top. Another view controller is launched, and the user has the option to register or cancel the registration. So the login. So each stage it is going to communicate the web service. Based on that, the view controller is going to work. Maybe I'll have the other view controller, so that when the user successfully logs in, we will display that particular view controller. We'll complete the design, then probably we'll come back and finish all the requirement. So new file. This is going to be for displaying all the list. Another one is going to be for add edit view controller, whatever. Because the same view controller, I'm going to use it for adding and editing. So I created the required view controllers. Let me bring them. So this is going to be for shopping list view controller. Once the user successfully logs in, he is going to see a list view. In that, what are all the shopping items he has already entered, which is going to be displayed. So and time to connect it. I'll make a manual segue because I need to log in I need to get the result from web service. Based on the result only, I will either decide to leave the user to a next view controller or put a pop-up saying your username is password is wrong. So I need to decide. I have to perform some action. Based on the result only, I have to take the user to other view controller. So I cannot directly write a automatic segue, simply pointed like this. It is not perfect because I have other jobs to be performed before and pointing the user to the other view controller. For that, probably I can create a manual segue pointing to the other view controller. So let me point it and land it. So remember the title itself is saying manual segue. Show. When you create a manual segue, the identifier name is mandatory because it's going to be called using that identifier. Without knowing the identifier, you cannot call that segue. So I'm going to say login success segue. And it is also recommended, if at all you create segues, give an identifier for your safer side. But it is optional, but I would still recommend giving a identifier for whatever segue you create, be it automatic or manual. Manual mandatory. So this is a manual segue because it the view controller or any components or any UI element of this particular login view controller can access the segue to land into the shopping list view controller. So this does not have the navigation item. Okay. Here then some list view is going to come. Okay, I think we probably make it as a list view controller. Should be a table view controller because it's going to be a table. Okay, that's anyway, that's tomorrow's part. I'll come back to that a little later. View controller. That is for our registration purpose. Add a bar button item. You can, if you decide to give a text here, you can give. Otherwise, define like this. So you can give a different whatever icon which is present here. So that also you can give. I usually prefer this one to give. Okay, plus mean you're trying to add an item. So when the user click on this item, you are going to launch the view controller. Just in this case, add edit view controller. So when the user click on add, they are launching this view controller. This also doesn't have a navigation item, so I'm just going to add. It will by default would have put all the back button. I've already told you, if at all you have a different opinion about having the back button title changed, of course you can also work on it, but particularly we are not going to focus at this point. So login is now it's a manual segue. So we have to finish the registration and login first to get our expected result. When the login goes successful, we let the user to go to the next view controller. Okay, it looks like I don't need this one. So we have a login view controller, registration view controller, and a bunch of view controllers defined. And let me start from registration because my first document talks about registration. Before that, let me create that helper class which is going to consume all the web service related task. That example I've already given to you. So touch class, it's going to be, I usually give a name web service, inherit from NS object. It's a simple class. Okay. This is going to contain a protocol. Protocol mean incomplete body or incomplete class. For your added advantage, I am not even changing even a single word of the last example, because I'm just trying to say why I'm going to use this one. So a delegate may have incomplete methods. We are going to get a NS dictionary. Okay. So this has an incomplete method, which is having only the method name defined, no active body. So a delegate, this is the delegate method. So I often say it as a kind of delegate method which is getting implemented. So a protocol typically acts like behalf of something. So that's the reason we call them as a delegates. Delegates behalf of some other object, it is going to work, or maybe a connector between the two different objects. So the delegate is going to perform some sort of connectivity. So how it communicates, through which the method which does not have a active body, somewhere it will implement with the active body, through that it will communicate, especially through the argument. Okay, let us create a property of the same. Since I don't know what type it is, you can even give a name web delegate or whatever name, because delegate giving too normal or too what you call quite generic word. If you want to give a different name, you can give it. So this has to be synthesized. Now we are done with this helper class. All we need to have the methods which I am going to use throughout. For example, how we will plan, because I want to have a same methods which can call different URLs. So in this case, I will be sending the method name as an argument, and each time it's going to be with the registration. Okay, I could think of some other logic. I'm adding one more argument to my delegate method, because I'm thinking about void everything is post, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay. an additional method called type, or an argument type I'm sending, which is nothing but a string. Okay. Okay, no problem, just appears like this. So now we have to establish all the stuff. NSURL. URL with a string. Okay, we built NSURL. Let me open my code, so I don't want to waste much time with that. Okay, I do have one of the issues. Don't try to copy paste it. I end up seeing a lot of special characters being coming, so better I type it directly instead of seeing from the old example. Let me type it anyway, it's not going to be much time. So ns double URL request. So let's make a request. Request with a URL. We already have a URL, and what we exactly need to use, some sort of cache policy and all the blah blah. This is slightly tricky. NS URL request use protocol policy. With the timeout we have 2240. So we made a mutable request, so I can attach additional headers. So request very important one is HTTP method. Here all going to be using post, because we made sure our document only uses post type payloads. So everything is going to be post, so I can easily call them. Set value for header field, very important value. We have to set the header type or the content type. That's also been explicitly given in our documentation, which header I need to send. So typically, let me try copy pasting how it works. What? Okay, now the payload. We haven't sent the payload. That's strange. Okay, I need to modify the method signature. I feel like missing something. When you make a change, am I missing anything? Why is this guy complaining? Remember, in Objective-C, there is no specific function name. All argument takes its own name. So in this case, the URL, payload, and type. I just put width so that a particular request you are making, which is containing additional information. First point, we have to define the length of the payload in string format. this may complain. Helping it typecast so that result number is integer. If you are keeping it long, because if you're expecting a longer integer, you can give a LT for a long definition. So that particular string value of your payload will come. So finally request, sorry, q setting the content length so the content length of the payload, and finally remember, depending on the server setup, not all the headers would need to be sent. Depending on the server, sometimes the server may not check the header in so strict mode. Sometimes it would require the header, all proper headers need to be sent. So whether if it works, if it doesn't work, I would recommend define all the header whatever possible. So in this case, my document already telling me to send the header which is of type form. Even though this is not mandatory, I prefer to send the payload length. Finally, send the payload itself, HTTP body, and it has to be decoded in such a way. It should be in NS data type. Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll create that separately. Data using encoding NSUTF. This encoding also sometime would be explicitly given by your document. What kind of encoding has to be followed? But they won't give it as a NSUTF. They'll say UTF-8 or 1632. That will find a mention in your documentation. So based on that, you need to send. If nothing mentioned, assuming it is going to be NSUTF-8 encoding. But I remember some of the, a RESTful document mention about what kind of encoding you need to follow. Sometimes they'll have a, UTF-16 type encoding. So whatever they have implemented, you would have to send accordingly. Okay, let me call the body. Now we finished the NS mutable URL request with the various headers, my payload, everything has been attached. Now time to define session, NSURL session. First get the access to the session, get the shared session, and another object NSURL session task, I hope. Yeah. Initialize the task from the session what you have. Okay. With a block method which is going to handle the response in a different thread rather than the current UI thread. Okay, data task with the request. First argument is the request, NS mutable request. The completion handler is a block method which requires 3 arguments. Okay, 1 second. NS data, which is the result, and NS response, URL response. And finally NS URL. pretty C++ type function. Okay, so we have a block which will hand over the task whenever it is completed. And if the task is ready, first we have to build the NS dictionary. We'll make it as a result and decode first. Okay, better we check the response. So NS HTTP URL response. So typecast it with the response what you receive from the block method. If status code set to 200, you have a valid response. Else something went. Be able to handle some sort of waste so that the URL is called again, but most of the cases that won't be a case. But still I leave the else block if at all I need to do some other mechanism. Maybe this is the place where I can bring the core data. If any data which is cached in the memory, I can bring it up and display if a internet connection or anything goes wrong. So I still have this particular block if at all required. Now let me build a NS dictionary. So serialize the input because it is going to be a JSON one. JS serialization and JSON object with the data. So what is the data you are getting? Just called data. NS JSON multiple containers and error. Define the error. Not to get confusion with this error which is given as an argument. This error is different. That error is entirely different. So we defined. See, again I am doing the same mistake. Okay. This error object which we have created, which is going to be an empty object to start with, but when something goes wrong while you parse your JSON, this particular error will have a value with the error which is depending on the JSON serialization, whatever error which is permitted. Now we finally have a dictionary. Time to pass it through the delegate. Get response from web. This particular thing should be with the sync block, but okay, anyway. This dictionary with the result by type. By whom? We are sending an argument which is type. Just the same thing, I'm going to send it over. Dispatch async get main queue and the block method. The caret is going to be void. Sorry, This where I end. It's just okay. Call this one inside. Okay. So we completed. Task has not been resumed. That is really bad one. So we wrote everything which is required for a web service response to be handled and reported through the delegate, which is called gets a response from web something else. It also hand over the result and the type. For what exactly the type. Let's see. Let me start from the registration view controller. First part, I need to employ the delegate. Sorry, I didn't import it. When delegate is called, the protocol is called, it starts complaining that response, the particular incomplete method is not implemented. So it's already some sort of pragma bug. We will come back. Maybe if we have to enable it, we'll do it. Okay, implement it. Okay. All looks fine. Now, when the save button is pressed, I need to read all the content in the given UI text fields. Then call a build a web service request, and when I send the web service request, it is going to give me a response. Based on the response, I will let the user go to the next screen. So first point, I have to initialize a couple of things here. Okay, registration with controller. First name. Okay, enter is having the key. So let me define everything. Okay, everything defined. Okay, first name, last name, password, username, password I'm forgetting. Okay. Where is that? This one. It's too important thing. That's a thing it's entirely based on. I forgot that. Password we have done it, right? So 1 2 3 4 5 is what we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So everything is done. Okay. We may need a UI picker view to do that. We'll come back to that a little later, because our ultimate focus is to see how the web service call works. Few other setups also you may need to do, because this document is based on HTTP. It's not HTTPS. By default, iOS would be expecting some sort of secure socket connection instead of a plain HTTP. To overcome that particular security violation, you may need to update something in your plist. That's what I was talking about. Plist is kind of a manifestation for your application, which contains every information about your application, which OS version it is using, and what is your product name. I mean, you can change the bundle whatever name at one point in time, but this is the one. You need to have some sort of exception added so that it can communicate to a lesser secure HTTP call. So to make that, there are two ways. This is the plist view, we often call it. If you right click on this plist, so there is an option to open as a source code. Same with the like kind of XML kind of configuration. Some developer prefer to edit it this way instead, directly from this way. Otherwise, you can see the property list in this way. So whatever way you prefer, and you can do that. In this case, I'm going to add one additional configuration. So just remember the plus, I am clicking on the information property list. So the plus, once I click app transport security settings, you have to pick it up. Depending on your Xcode version, you will get the suggestion or may not get the suggestion. But for me, I'm getting app transport security settings. In that, make sure you slightly open this particular configuration, click on it, allow arbitrary loads, mean just call any kind of URLs and set the value to yes, boolean values. So this configuration you have to add in your plist in order to call the HTTP with the lesser security URLs. If you see that the same in the open as source code, you will see few information added. NS app transport security, underneath one dictionary which is having S or true value for NS allow arbitrary loads. I'll put that in my site. So what is the configuration you need to add? You can anyway copy paste it, but this is the exception you need to add so that this particular application can call the lesser secure HTTP. This is a built-in security setting in your iOS to prevent unauthorized data lost, because HTTPS makes sure that both the end is encrypted before the value is being sent to the server. But since we are not going to encrypt anything for a testing purpose, you would have to add this exception in your plist file. The plist file could be found in the root of your application itself, info.plist. So this you need to add in order to make it working. Okay. Let me go to the registration view controller. This is where the save button is going to get clicked so that the registration data is going to be saved. I haven't connected the save button. Touch down and search for save button. So when a save button is pressed, it is going to call this particular event or this particular function. Here I can make the web service call. Before that, I will have to initialize my web service URL or web service class which I just imported. Define a property. This particular class, you may prefer to synthesize it. initialize this class it is like some other high level language. We put a new keyword like, so initializing class is in Objective C will be web service allocate some memory, initialize. This is what it does. So it just allocates some memory for this object to work. And couple of things. First we need to connect the delegate. So it's lowercase set web delegate. And this has been implemented over here because the delegate is actually been implemented in the class itself. So it is appropriate to call it self. This set web delegate method was added by the synthesizer. Remember we are synthesizing, so synthesizer will add a setter getter method. So that's the reason you are getting a method called set web delegate. Otherwise you wouldn't have got. So you've got a set web delegate method, you are setting self. And finally you can call the URL wherever you want. In fact, I'm going to call when the save button is pressed. First part, the payload we have to build. So the payload is going to be in a string with the format. The format how it should be. In fact, we have a format here. I mean these values are going to be act as a placeholder. That's the rate at am I missing anything? That's the reason copy paste always gives me a trouble. So be careful on doing a copy paste. Okay, so the placeholder, every first name after that 1% art is there, so a string is needed. In fact, what is that? First name. I remember I've given a name first. I haven't synthesized, looks like. Okay, synthesize helps me to treat a local object. So first name field, last name field, username field, password field, gender. Username, password field, text. Gender will come back and add it, but anyway I'm just going to keep as a, I'm going to treat it as if a simple text input at this point. So a payload has been built in such a way it will create a first name, attribute name, and the value will be whatever the user enters. So this will be added here, the last name will come here, the username will come here, and the password, and finally the gender. The percentage art will be replaced by whatever value you are sending in the same sequence. The first one, the first name will be added to the very first occurrence of this particular @ symbol. So don't change the order. Whatever order you are sending, maintain the same order. You build the payload. So the payload is ready. Now time to call. Call web service URL. This is the URL I need to send. That is should be there in my document. With the payload we have now. With the type, maybe for my additional data registration. for just differentiation for which purpose I am accessing that URL for your understanding. Okay, this URL should be this one. We'll still need to modelize the code, couple of constants we can define, but at least it should give you an overview of what I'm trying to do. So when you make the call to the web service URL with the payload whatever you sent, you may expect a response coming at this point. So based on the response, we have to decide what has to be taken. Let the user to call, go back to the login screen, or put a dialog or something so that it can be handled in that way. Okay. It looks like I may need some sort of warning windows as well. Okay, we'll first check if okay, so first we'll check whether I'm going to receive the response or not. It's called result. So if my data goes correct, I should be able to get the response. Pardon? Which one? Yeah, that I will modify. As of now, just I'm going to enter it directly. I'll give a number 1 or 2 or something like that. I'm just going to enter 1 now. Later I'll put a picker view. From there I'll pick the value. Okay, so at this point, if I receive the result, I should get this callback working. Let's see. And couple of other thing also that is very important. I would recommend doing that. If the user touches begin, disable the keyboard, software keyboard. So this is maybe a recommended practice because we don't have a scroll view at this point. So chances are there the user will press somewhere outside of the UI so that the keyboard will get dismissed and still he can see the data. Okay, let's test it. I've done it for registration alone. So this auto correction is something I don't want. I'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for testing. I'm going to enter 1 because I'm going to replace it with a different value. So if I go into click save, I should at least get, yeah, I hope I'm getting it. If you see that it is registering my data because it has registered successfully into my server with the given log, the server time it is maybe located in US, and it is registering, it is giving me affirmative result okay and giving me a message successfully registered. So it means it makes a call to the server and receives the response accordingly. And at this point, if the data goes successfully, this particular view controller dismisses itself and goes to the login screen so that the same username password could be entered to go to the next view controller. So we have to do, first point I need to read the result first, then decide about whatever the data I may need to. And also once you successfully register, I would recommend save the username and password to your NS user default. Because if you see the design, each request you would need to send the username password. So this username password has to be sent throughout. So it is better to save somewhere so that this particular default value could be used across anywhere in your application. but it's a recommended, but we will again come back because the username password the user has to again going to enter manually. After the successful username password done, only we are going to let the user to see the shopping list, but it's a recommended practice. So let me add some code. So the dictionary what I am receiving, I have to check a couple of things. One is, I'll show it from here. Yeah. So the result object is having OK and the data. So it's a NS dictionary. Immediately there is an object for a key result. I should expect OK value. So okay. What is the object for that? It is called result. If result object is equal to string OK, so successfully registered, else okay. In this case, the failure response is going to contain failed. So it is going to give me other than OK. So whatever response come other than OK, I am going to assume the response, the particular registration failed. So something I can interpret from that for example, where it is, yeah, here. And also give me a message, but I can use it, I can display wherever needed. Okay, if the data is successfully registered, we can let the user to dismiss the view controller. Else we can put a we can display alert controller, maybe saying that your username password is wrong, retry something, we can do that. I'm thinking about having that also because we may need a lot of pop-ups in our example, looks like. Okay, we can do one thing. This particular class we are going to use it for our helper purpose only. So one event we may need to handle. Okay, no problem. Void display just create a helper method, so that my intention is to use the alert controller wherever needed with a simple call. So that's because it is not calling them. UI alert control stuff cannot be accessed from here. Okay. Okay, so UI components are because we are inheriting everything from NS object. NS object does not have any reference to your UI elements, so the alert controller typically may not be possible, but okay, we'll leave the message. If at all required, we'll use it. Next part, if the registration goes successful, okay, login. I'll keep it as a local one at this point. With a title, error. Okay, that also we can do. With a message. Preferred style. Am I missing anything? Style is from default something, right? UI alert controller. This is alert action. Okay, and we'll put a OK UI action button. Cancel handler if at all required. Probably I'm going to need any handlers, so let me leave it. UI alert control add action. So what was that? Self. This. Can somebody remind me what is that? Self launch view controller, display view controller. That's what dismiss. Okay, sorry. present view controller. UI controller. Okay, so if at all registration fails, that alert is going to be displayed and the rest of the part remains same. At least we concluded the registration screen even though it's not perfect. Let me try with a new value, maybe with the same value. Okay, registration failed because the username already taken, because we have just registered few minutes before. So it is not going to let me to register again with the same username taken. So this is how the web service document has been implemented, because it is checking in the server. If anything goes wrong, it will give you a message the username is already taken. So that's actually happening here. So I would have to modify the username. This auto correction I don't want. Okay, I'm going to save. Now assuming that get dismissed mean the username has got successfully registered. Now you can go ahead and apply the same username and password, let the user to the go back to the second view controller, but that part we had to write. So let me complete that as well. To make that, I need to initialize couple of objects. Going to storyboard. Username and password has to be initialized and the login button action has to be added. So let me see whatever I have added over there. Nothing is there. When the login button pressed, it is going to be calling this one. Okay. Let me initialize all the input fields. So first one is the username. Okay, connected. And also I need to define what I am going to do when the user click on the login button. So it's connected. So let us call the web service one more time for the login purpose. Implement web service delegate and initialize it as well. Synthesize all. Okay, and the method has to be implemented. It's done. Everything fine. When the login is pressed, first build a NS string with a payload. String with a format. What you need to send for a login? Username and the password. So let us so the placeholder is going to be coming here. It's your C++ type, how you print an output. So payload, first one is going to be username field, text, password field, text. So you build a payload, hopefully, okay, right. So the payload is ready, now time to call the web service. But before that web service, we have to initialize. Initialized. And tell the delegate has been implemented over here. Set web delegate. It's been initialized. Now call it. And the URL is in the document. Payload, we have it here. And it's going to be for login. So the URL will call. Okay. So when you make a call to this URL with the payload or the username password has been typed, you will get a call back here. So make sure you first check whether you are getting. This particular type I have added for added advantage. Sometime in the single page you may be calling multiple URLs with the same delegate. So in that case you would need to identify which URL being called and so what kind of a data encoding decoding you need to perform. For that purpose I am sending additional attributes from the argument, to the argument, so that this particular URL call was actually by a login. So that's the reason I'm doing. If you are making, for example, somewhere in your code, you are making another URL somewhere, some other different URL. If you make that, suddenly you will get the callback here itself, the same place. So instead, you can give, okay, this is for get all item. So you can put a else if block and handle the particular NS directory iteration in a different way. So that's the reason I have put an additional type attribute to distinguish which URL is being called in the given web service, if at all. That's the reason I have kept it, but maybe it is not going to be needed at this point. So I'm just going to comment. Okay, so now we need to see what is the sample response is going to come. Where is that? The document is not there. Okay, so the login, I would get affirmative value as okay for the result attribute, and I'll be getting various information, and for failure response I'm getting a failed response. Okay. First part, if the object for key is giving me okay, login success. If anything comes, login failed. Okay. So in this case, if we get a successful login, we will let the uh, user to go to the second view controller. We have a manual segue already been drafted. So it is for performs segue with identifier. Tell the identifier sender who is going to call self. So this identifier we should have defined it somewhere. Where exactly? Here. This is what the manual segue. You see what is the identifier we have given. Just login success segue. Make sure you call that. And you will be redirected to that particular view controller. And this guy is complaining me. What is that? Whatever. I really don't want to see even a single warning in my project, because for a potential developer, warning itself should be treated as an error. Even though it doesn't disturb your code execution, for a perfect or professional developer, he mind about the warning, and warning also he treated them as an error. So make sure your application does not even contain a warning. In fact, it was due to some sort of style stuff, so I just made it as a done, then it disappeared. Okay. So that if the user enters the right login credential, you will be taken to the other view controller. Otherwise, we'll have to type the. I think repeating the alert controllers doesn't look really good for me. We'll work around something to make that also reusable. But at this point, I'm just going to copy paste. There is no message attribute, so you have to type the username password wrong, you will end up seeing an alert. Otherwise, it will let the user to log in. So let's see. I remember giving two, three, four, five. If the username goes successful, it neither happens. Okay. Something going wrong. So either I forgot my login credential, maybe. Okay, let me register one more time. Forgot it. And I have one registration. I'll do it one more time. So I'm not putting a DEV 1 2 3 4 5. Okay. No, that's really bad. Okay, time to check what is the value it is giving me. So result is equal to string. I would like to verify what exactly it is giving me. It's getting failed. Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll do a first registration and see what is the response it is giving. Or maybe I'm sending some wrong data. We'll have to debug at this point. Simple password. Oh, username already taken. Oh my god. That's also taken. A, B, C, D. Okay, it went successful. So the username and the password ABCD. So I'm just going to use the same. Let's see what exactly it is giving me. Okay, it did this time. Anyway, so it took me to the second view controller. It means my username password was validated and the value. So since the login credential correct, it took me to the other screen where I'm going to display a list view, and the user is going to click on that and he is going to fill the form and save it, and the value is going to be persisted over here. So if I enter a wrong username or password, it won't let me to connect it. So everything is being saved in the server, still being validated using the web services which we have connected. So in this example, I have used two URLs. One is for registration, another one is for login. I created all the required, design. For example, this web service header, this web service class, which is acting as a helper class for me, and it has all the required web service callback or whatever it need to inform. So we have a delegate also implemented. The same delegate I'm implementing wherever my web service requirement is coming. So I'm using that in the login view controller. I'm using the same in the registration view controller, and I'm making the call. I'm based on the response, I'm deciding whether let the user to the next screen or retain the user in the same screen, putting an alert stating that whatever the information he has entered is wrong. So this entire part now synchronized with the server. The subsequent part, what we are going to write at this point, the list of item associated with the user, of course, is going to save that using this particular form where we are going to add tomorrow, when the user enters the form detail, that the list appears, and of course he has the privilege to modify. Once he has done, he can log out and he can use another phone, use the same login credential. That particular data will synchronize with that device as well, because the data is externally stored. So we don't need to worry about persisting the data. It's everything synchronized with the server environment with the RESTful URI, URL, whatever we have given. So the same strategy, if you have a time, you can still adapt to it and finish this entire other two view controller as well. But anyway, tomorrow afternoon I will also join. I'll write it. But if you could finish that earliest, you can do that. And I need to do a lot of touch-ups. This back button I need to modify, and the title I would like to modify, and this back button I need to modify. And in the registration screen I need to put a picker view, and I need to adapt the NS user default. There are other work we have. Anyway, going ahead, we will create it. Once we complete it, we will also add a scroll view here, because this particular form is smaller at this point, but sometime the user would be required to enter more than 50 or 60 elements of, so number of detail comes in, it is recommended to keep a scroller inside. So how to have the overflowing option, that will also we will work going ahead. So this is a starting point of creating a cloud-based shopping list app. I will upload the code. I would recommend you guys start immediately after the break maybe, and till tomorrow afternoon you can work on it. The rest of the part I'll continue in the afternoon session.